Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to have Governor Markell join us. He's Vice Chair of the National Governors Association. And a lot of the talk over the past couple of days, with the exception of Secretary Albright, has certainly been in the business realm. And we're very happy to have you both react to what you've heard this morning in terms of the recommendations, although the votes may not be finalized yet, and also to talk politics, because of all things, this is a very political year. So you had the opportunity to sit in one of the task force meetings this morning. Without knowing the final tally, what struck you in terms of the recommendations as you've been sitting here this morning?
Well, I thought it was a great conversation. I'm particularly focused on the education issue because I'm absolutely convinced we're in this global war for jobs, a global war for talent, and talent is all about skills. And I think it really it ties in. I thought the conversation about the business case was particularly interesting. And what struck me is that people feel as though the business case really needs to be made, because this is a highly competitive world out there. And the question is, where are the boards of directors of all these companies? Because the only thing that matters is what kind of performance these companies achieve, and whether it's based on return on assets, return on equity, return on investment, whatever the industry, whatever the metric, that's the only thing that matters. And the only thing that's going to generate that over a long period of time is having the very best people. And the fact is, and having Susie and Jack Welch follow, I think will be particularly interesting, because Mr. Welch obviously so well known for developing leadership throughout the world. It seems to me that over a period of time, more and more boards will come to the conclusion the only thing that matters is great talent. Great talent can be men, great talent can be women. Let's make sure we're getting them in.
Do you agree with the recommendation that somehow the business case needs to be made better? I mean, there's people like yourself who may get it, but many who don't. I mean, the composition of boards, the number of women may be flatlining or declining. It's declining in several industries. Many people think the progress has not been as swift as it could be.
Well, it clearly hasn't been as swift. I mean, if you look at those pipeline numbers from the McKinsey report, that's very clear. So I think, I mean, it's very worthwhile to have sessions like this, and particularly places like the Wall Street Journal hammering on it. But I do think over time, shareholders demand returns. That's the boards of directors work for the shareholders, and they've got to make sure that they're bringing the right talent in.
Let's talk about STEM, which is another big topic this morning. This is a national issue. It's an issue for men and women, girls and boys. Apparently you've done work on this issue and are actually having a call later today about it. Can you describe what you've been up to?
Well, we just released the first report of our STEM Council, which I appointed about just over a year ago. And again, when we think about the kinds of jobs that are going to really be valued today and in the future, so many of them require some kind of STEM skills. And so one of these subcommittees is focused specifically on girls and making sure that they're getting into these courses. And what we want to be is we want to be strategic about it, and we want to be very action oriented. And obviously I think that's what we all hope for coming out of a conference like this. But one of the things that we found in terms of the STEM Council's report is we took a pretty careful look at which specific skills are going to be represented in the highest growth industries. Well, not surprisingly, one of them is around computer programming, computer science. So we dug in a little deeper, and we said, okay, well, if that's true, how many Delaware students are taking the AP classes around computer programming and computer science? And the fact is, not nearly enough compared to some of the other AP classes. And that's an issue, because when we're trying to, GE, for instance, has an operation in Delaware. We've got lots of technology companies in Delaware. My job, very simply, is to make sure that when CEOs are deciding where to invest their next dollar of capital, where to hire their next employee, they think of Delaware first. And they will think of Delaware first when they believe that that's where they're going to have access to the best talent. And so we've got to make sure that we're starting. High school's too late. I think middle school's too late. I mean, I think really getting kids excited at a young age about what these science skills can do for them is critical. And by the way, I would add world language as well. It's another area of critical importance. We will be opening up in Delaware over the next 5 years 20 immersion schools in our state, schools within schools, where students will spend half their school day learning in a different language. And we've got to make sure that we're getting lots of girls enrolled in those classes as well.
So what are the specific recommendations to get more kids into those AP computer science classes? What are you going to be making changes throughout the school system, or?
It's a combination, and this is really about, it really is about businesses working with the schools, because what we've got to do is we've got to get kids excited. And the way to get kids excited is for them to see what the hands-on opportunities are for them with employers in our state and employers elsewhere. And when we can get kids visiting labs or visiting research and development centers that are at local companies, when they can see the kinds of products that our companies are making, whether it be the Gore-Tex for fabrics coming out of W.L. Gore, whether it's new medications coming out of AstraZeneca, whether it's new biologically based materials coming out of DuPont. When students can make the connection between what it is that they're doing in school and real products that they can touch and feel, and real careers that they can envision for themselves, that's how you got to get them excited. I think it's both a push and a pull, but I think the pull piece is really, really important.
You just mentioned childcare. I was interested in that being one of the recommendations today, and Delaware was specifically mentioned for what you're doing. And I know you may have greased the wheel a little bit in the session there, but
that's my job. That's my job.
Can you describe what you're attempting to do? And obviously, this is not a very bright time for many states fiscally. So spending money is easy. How are you going to pull off something like this?
Well, I'm more excited about what's going on in education in our state than I've ever been. We came in first place in the first Race to the Top challenge, and thank you, and we're heavy duty into implementation mode right now. But I think perhaps even the bigger game changer is what we're doing in early childhood education. So just about a year ago, we have a budget year that ends at the end of June. Some additional funding came on the table, and I essentially had room to make one new investment. And without any hesitation, I chose early childhood because of this research that, the research that shows it's the most effective economic development investment a state can make. But secondly, just the firsthand observation of the tragedy it is when you meet a 5-year-old kid who at the age of 5 is already a year or two behind their peers, already has a deficit in their vocabulary of 1,000 words. And so what we did in Delaware, throwing money is not the issue. What you've got to do, you've got to be smart about it. So what we have in Delaware, we've got an excellent rating system. We have very clear milestones for our centers to meet, and based on whether or not they meet those milestones, they're rated from 1 to 5 stars. There are external reviewers. So it's a system that's set up very well. But what we've never had is we've never had centers with the resources to make the necessary investments. So we basically, with the support of our General Assembly, we put some additional money on the table. And the way it works is very simple. First of all, we're increasing a little bit for kids who are subsidized. We're increasing the across-the-board rate because the fact is so many of the caregivers in these early childhood centers will just go to the next job as soon as they can find something that pays 50 cents an hour more. And so it's really tough to have skilled people. But the other thing is we're giving real incentives to these centers to improve their quality. So a 3-star center is going to be reimbursed at 80% of the market rate, 4-star at 90%, and 5-star at 100%. We made this investment before the second Race to the Top. It's called the Early Learning Challenge. Before that was announced, we made this investment before that. And because we made that investment before this new challenge was announced, the judges of the additional challenge said these people are for real. So as a result, we are going to go over the next 5 years from 20% to 80%, the percentage of poor kids in Delaware who were enrolled in a quality preschool program. And I think that could be as much of a game changer as anything that we're doing.
There's been a sense that in politics that progress of women has plateaued. Secretary Albright was here last night, and she spoke of, she obviously made history with her appointment as Secretary of State, and the needle hasn't changed that much nationally since you're active in the National Board of Governors. What's happening at that level and politically in general to women participation?
So let's talk about it in two pieces. Let's talk about sort of, as Secretary Albright was, the appointed position and then the elected piece. So my view on the appointed position is that it's the responsibility of those of us in government, particularly those of us like governors, most of the governors who have term limits, to recognize that our responsibility when we're serving, we certainly have a responsibility to the here and now, to our constituents of today. But I'm only, at best, if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected, I will have 8 years. So I also have a fundamental responsibility to make sure that our state has a cadre of people, when I'm finished, who are ready to assume leadership positions when I'm done. And so part of it, and this is my issue, but I also have to make sure it's the issue of all 16 of my cabinet secretaries. So from the very first cabinet meeting, when we met the day that I was sworn in back in 2009, we had this conversation. And I talked to them about, we talk a lot about legacy, and I ask them each year, what's the legacy that they want to leave behind? But part of that legacy has to do with making sure we leave to the next governor, whoever that is, whatever party, a group of skilled people who are prepared to assume leadership positions. And that specifically means making sure we've got qualified women to assume those positions. So I think that's really important. With respect to the
So how many women could you give us a sense of what the results have been?
Well, I mean, I think they're in development now. I mean, so when I came in, I appointed 5 of my 16 cabinet secretaries were women. They happen to run our Department of Health and Social Services and our Department of Education, which between them represent 2/3 of our budget. They run the budget. They ran the budget office. Run the budget office. The Department of Transportation, which is another huge agency, as well as the Kids Department. But what I want to make sure of is that the next governor has, a whole lot of other women in addition, because they may be done. They may not want to serve in another gubernatorial term. So the question is, what are we doing at the deputy secretary level? What are we doing at the division director level? So that those people are ready to step up. And I think we've got some fantastic people who will be ready in a year, a couple years, or if I'm fortunate enough, maybe 3 or 5 years to step in. On the elected piece, it is interesting, and I think it's worthy of reflection about why this is happening. When you look at the McKinsey numbers about the pipeline, and sort of the pipeline gets smaller and smaller as you get to the CEO position. Right now, we've got, when I was elected in 2008, we had several more women governors than we do today. Now, 2 of them went off to become cabinet members for President Obama. Others were term limited, and even this year, Governor Gregoire of Washington State is stepping down. She will be replaced by a man. Governor Perdue of North Carolina is stepping down. She will be replaced by a man. And so I think, if you look at that pipeline, which starts all the way from school board to people running for local government, to people running for state representative and state senator, we just all have a lot of work to do to make sure that we're reaching out. And I thought some of the recommendations here around celebrating the small wins, I thought was absolutely right. Giving real visibility, making sure that we're giving real visibility to women in our communities who are stepping up in leadership positions at not-for-profits, at businesses, and encouraging them to get involved in civic life.
Mm-hmm. Do you see this happening at all levels of government, in a sense that that politics is, if business is tough, maybe politics is even tougher? Yeah,
I think it's tougher. And I think it's tougher because in business, again, CEOs and boards are really measured based on, clearly quantifiable metrics, and it's every bit in their incentive to make sure that they recruit the best people. The problem is the incentives in politics are a little bit different. And the incentives in politics sometimes can work against this, because if you recruit a really good woman to get involved, not I, but there are plenty of politicians who would think, well, you're just setting somebody up to run against you. You're setting somebody up to run against your favorite person. And so I think it's a problem, and I think we need to make sure that there's plenty of pressure applied, not only from the top, but from below as well.
Mm-hmm. And the recommendation from your panel specifically, I believe it was, I don't know if Kim is here, but 30% at government. Do you think it would be helpful in terms of taking it down to that level of making sure that...
I'm not a big believer in quotas. I mean, I think the idea of leading by example is absolutely the right way to go. And I also think we have to be prepared to take some chances. And this is another issue. When I spent my career in business before getting involved, before running for state treasurer in 1998. And one of the biggest differences from my perspective between business and government and politics is that in business you have to take risks. If you're running a business and you're not figuring out a new product, a new distribution channel, a way to take some cost out of the equation, you will not succeed, because you can be absolutely certain that your competitor is taking those risks. Unfortunately, in politics, all of the incentives run against taking risks, because you could read about a mistake in a newspaper, your opponent could use it against you, the auditor could file a report against you. We have got to be willing to take risks. They've got to be we've got to mitigate the risk, but in terms of putting people into positions where they can prove themselves. And for example, I've got a secretary of one of my departments She didn't apply for this job. She wanted to talk to me about another job. But I saw something that I thought was really special in her. And she's doing a phenomenal job. I made sure that she was surrounded by skilled people who knew the subject matter of her department. But we have got people in government, people who are in positions of leadership and able to appoint people to key positions. We have got to take some smart risks, put people in places where they can prove themselves so that they are then ready to go to the next position.
But you don't think any sort of requirement or quota is the way to prod a less forward-thinking person to take a risk?
I don't think you legislate this. I mean, I think the idea of shaming is fine. And places like the Wall Street Journal can do that very well. But I think there are plenty of advocacy organizations. And I think any of you in your particular states, if you see leaders who are not putting enough women in positions of authority, they ought to hear from you. And not only ought they to hear from you with your complaint, it would be even better if you go to them and say, look, you've got these vacancies coming up. We've taken the liberty of putting together this list of really qualified people. Maybe you don't know all of them. And why don't you interview them? Why don't you consider them? So I'm just, I'm not a big believer that the way to fix all the problems in the world is to come up with some new piece of legislation. But I do think that the pressure from below and the side and the media and everything else is absolutely fair game.
You have been interested in the issue of women in finance for some time. You told me about a program you started some years ago that kind of initially got you interested in the subject of women and in the economy, really.
I did. When I was elected state treasurer in 1998, one of the first things we did is we put together a one-day conference on women. And it was called the Every Woman's Money Conference. And we did that. Women face a number of disadvantages when it comes to money. They tend to spend less time in the workforce than men do because they're either caring for kids or for elderly parents. They make less money than men do, and that gets worse with age. They invest more conservatively. Sometimes that's good, but a lot of times that's bad. And they live longer. And so they have less money, and it has to last them a longer period of time. So we did this one-day conference in '99, and I was just amazed by the number of people. Over 1,000 people showed up, and by the diversity. But what we realized is that a one-day conference is not going to change the world. And what we really wanted to create was a movement. So we turned this one-day conference, which we now do every 2 years. It's very expensive. But more importantly, we created a movement. We call it the Delaware Money School, which this year will offer 600 free classes around our state on everything from getting out of debt to beginning investing to preparing for retirement. The most popular class is called A Man Is Not a Financial Plan. And so we've had tens and tens of thousands of people attend this class. And now this has expanded to something that I think is really exciting. We've created what we call our the Stand By Me program. It's really started a few years ago. We created what I believe is the best EITC outreach campaign across the country. That was a way of essentially getting people in the door to learn more about financial education opportunities. But now what we've done is we're working with
the earned income tax credits.
Earned income tax credits, thank you. We are working with employers who are beginning to understand that financially literate employees are actually really important to their businesses. So two quick examples. We're working with the ShopRite supermarkets in Delaware. And we actually now have financial coaches who are working with the employees of those ShopRites. Because the fact is, if you're the owner of ShopRite, and you've got a lot of employees who don't understand money, who are getting themselves into all kinds of debt problems, they're probably going to be less effective while they're working. We're working with the local hotel as well. People are not paid all that well. We're going to be doing the same thing with hospitals. And so the Stand By Me program is really about putting financial coaches integrated into these centers of employment as a way of educating particularly women. 65% at least of the people who participate are women.